In today's episode, we're going to talk about 5 ways you can support your spouse who's intermittent fasting.
Tip number 1, take over cooking duties as the spouse who's not intermittent fasting.
So in the beginning of intermittent fasting, it's difficult, I would say, for most people to sit there and cook while you're trying to fast. And so, like, if you've got young kids, or if, customarily I used to cook breakfast for you, and it wasn't something that we really discussed. I just kind of let him take over his own duties. Like, I didn't really talk about intermittent fasting, but he would do that. And I think maybe I would just ask him, like, could you make the kids breakfast if I was feeling like that was going to be too much of a challenge. And he never complained.
Of course not, because I'm amazing. And you can be amazing too.
But I would say that you don't have to do this forever. Like, nowadays, I can, like, cook all day long if I need to and never be tempted at all. But I've been doing intermittent fasting for years. So I would say, especially in the first, month or so, if you can just take over the duties for your spouse, that would be super helpful.
Or if your kids are old enough, teach them how to cook and they can make their own breakfast.
Yeah, certainly, because I think we only had, at that point, one child couldn't make their own breakfast. So I would just, let him take care of that. And, ultimately that temptation to eat while you're cooking does fade away. But, it just takes time.
Tip number 2, don't sabotage your spouse who is intermittent fasting. Now, what this can mean is several different things. One, you could ask the spouse, just try to be like, come on, you can eat. It's okay. Just eat. That's not what they want. They want to not eat. So quit sabotaging them.
But also, don't just assume that your spouse is trying to sabotage you. Because I think what happens a lot of times is, your spouse, like, whenever you would say that, I don't think you ever thought, hey, let me sabotage you right now.
No, it was for my benefit.
Right.
So that I didn't feel bad about eating in front of you.
Right. So it was about, you kind of felt guilty. And so you were trying to be nice, right? You're trying to say, oh, well, obviously you're suffering right now because you're not eating. So
because I know I would be.
Ultimately, being consistent in the fasting window makes intermittent fasting easier, just in general. So even though you think maybe you're like helping them to, be a little bit more relaxed and stuff, it actually can make it a lot harder on them to be consistent. And because a lot of times if you're not being consistent, you're not going to get results either, which is like this negative spiral that you're going to go down. So instead, just support them and don't try to get them to be inconsistent in the fasting window.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense too. Like, as the fasting spouse, if you are saying, like, my fasting window is always this, right? Then that makes it easier for me to know whether or not I should be offering you food.
Right, yeah. So being clear in your communication, just saying, like, I'm fasting right now every day between these hours. I think that's one of the big things. If you don't make that clear with your spouse, they're not even going to know, and it can end up kind of creating some tension.
Right. But if you have to fluctuate your times, your spouse can get over it.
Right.
Tip number 3, be willing to compromise.
Yeah, I think this is an important thing to talk about, because when we're talking about weight loss, it's for the rest of your life. So it's not like something that you're going to just have to do, for a short period of time and then you're just like done and you have no kinds of rules for yourself. And so with intermittent fasting, especially if this is something you want to do for the rest of your life, I think it's important to start to compromise now and say, what are the things that are causing friction? Because there can be things like, for example, if you are doing OMAD, then you're not eating breakfast and you're not eating lunch and your spouse may miss you.
My love language is quality time. And quality time is found when you're eating or sharing food or drink or something together.
So one compromise that I struck, because I could kind of foresee this being an issue, like over the long term. I don't think you ever verbalized this, but it's just something I thought about. But
I don't know where she's headed. So.
but I knew that being able to have coffee together would be a nice substitute for having breakfast together and having lunch together. I thought, if I just say, well, I do allow myself coffee during the fasting window, we can still have that quality time that you wanted. And, but I still didn't have to eat breakfast and lunch.
Right. And that's always nice to be able to sit and have a nice cup of coffee.
Another thing that I did was to have my cheat day. And because you would make
chocolate chip pancakes from scratch,
Every-
not from a box, from scratch. I
Yeah.
measure out the flour and the sugar and the baking powder and the salt and everything else.
And he would do that every Sunday morning. It was this sweet thing that he would do.
Still do.
Yes, and he still does it. But at the time, it felt like, this is making intermittent fasting so hard, because I would be fine Monday through Saturday, but Sunday always tripped me up. But when I just decided, like, hey, let me work with that, figure out a compromise, I just said, what if I just take Sunday off as a cheat day? And it worked, and it made our lives so much easier.
And I wasn't, to be clear, I wasn't doing the pancake breakfast to sabotage her.
No.
I was doing it for the kids and our family as a thing. The kids got used to it, and we were just doing it.
And you had been doing it for years at that point. And then I decided to lose weight, and then it was always this thing that was tripping me up. And I didn't really communicate that at all. Like, it's not like I said, hey, this would be really helpful if you would stop. But I realized, like, I wouldn't want that. I didn't want to give that up. And so I just figured out a compromise that worked.
Tip number 4 is to compliment on positive changes, and not just about weight loss positive changes, right?
Right.
About everything in life.
Right. Yeah. I think that it's difficult. Like, if you don't, like, you've never had to lose weight, right? And so if you've never had to lose weight, you really do not know. You have no idea what your spouse is going through. You just don't. And I think there's a lot of emotion there that you kind of you may think
aren't familiar with.
That you have no idea. You don't really know what they're going through. You don't know what it's like to have to try to figure out rules for yourself with food, or like, you don't even think about, like, how often that does come up for somebody who has to deal with food issues, and so I think that it's difficult also to compliment appropriately without offending the person inadvertently.
Right.
And
absolutely. Well, if you've been married for any length of time, it's hard to compliment at all. If you've, it can be dangerous to compliment, because you may say something that seems like it's not a compliment, because it may be difficult for a spouse to compliment on weight loss, because that's then saying, I noticed that you had gained weight before, but then you didn't say anything before, probably.
Yeah, so that can be kind of a difficult thing, even speaking as myself. I sometimes would get frustrated that he didn't say anything about my weight loss. But then on the other hand, I was kind of relieved that he didn't say anything, because I kind of thought, oh, well, maybe he didn't notice. And, so it's kind of like a danged if you do, danged if you don't kind of thing.
So some positive things to focus on complimenting are, like, attitude, just overall personality, or just kind of how things are going around the house.
But I would say also be sincere. Like, I think that we are, ultimately, the person knows, like, they need to lose weight. Like, if you are currently obese, you really don't want somebody saying, you look so skinny, because that's not sincere. And that can make you madder, I think, than, just having no compliment at all. So keep it sincere.
And tip number 5 is to encourage your spouse.
The weight loss journey is incredibly long, and you need encouragement along the way. I mean, some people are really good at, like, kind of just encouraging themselves, but not everybody is good with that. And your spouse, I think it's good to remember, first of all, they are on your team. Like, they've made the commitment to be with you for the rest of your life. So obviously they're a fan of yours. And just knowing that, like, and trying to just always think, like, they are in my corner, and just, like, understanding that and just accepting it, that they are rooting for you, even if they're not saying it, they are rooting for you.
Right. Yeah. And I'll point out that one thing to remember is that if your spouse who's losing weight is coming up against a wall, like they're feeling discouraged or something, you have to be mindful of how you talk to them about it. Like, not saying things like, well, you need to lose the weight,
Yeah.
So instead, focus on talking with them about their why they started losing weight. What's inside them that's that's wanting them to lose weight.
Right, yeah, and just being encouraging, just like there's no such thing, I don't think, as too much encouragement, too much genuine encouragement. Like if your spouse is just feeling discouraged, because they will feel discouraged. There's so many times that they're gonna want to throw in the towel, and just having somebody there to just believe in you. Like you don't have to think about the right words to say. Just saying you can do this, I think, is the best tactic that there is to just keep them, encouraged, because I know it is kind of an emotional landmine. I think just hearing that, like, you can do this, that's all you really need to hear. So hopefully this video was useful. I think that this is a very common thing where people kind of feel like, oh, my spouse is just not supporting me. But I think ultimately it comes down to communication. Just like marriage in general, this is just another thing in your marriage or in your relationship that you're going to have to just deal with. And just being really clear in your communication and trying to, instead of assuming things about what the other person is thinking and that kind of thing, just focus on clearly communicating, and I think you'll find that the issues resolve themselves.
Yeah, because the spouse who's not intermittent fasting is most likely encouraging you, even if they're not saying anything. Right. They're not wishing you harm. So even if they're not vocal, they're probably just trying to protect themselves
from an argument.
Just understand that, and then be clear with them with communication, letting them know that you need their encouragement.
Right, yeah. Ask for what you need. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you found it helpful. If you're currently trying to lose weight and you're just having a hard time, check out my Slow and Steady Success Academy. There you'll find a course called Intermittent Fasting for Weight Loss 101, where I take you through the entire process from start to finish and how to implement intermittent fasting successfully in your life for weight loss. The link is in the description. The All Access Pass to Slow and Steady Success Academy is a monthly subscription plan that gets you access to every course that is currently available in this academy, as well as any that will become available in the future. Also, you'll get access to our private All Access Pass members only Facebook group.